this is the fun part where we get to see all of our participants joining in. Welcome, everybody. This is Lauren Bailey. I'm joined by Alyssa, Meredith, and Kevin, and we're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm so excited about the next hour. I'm going to learn a ton. Thank goodness this is being recorded. So if you're like me and wondering if you can write down all of these notes fast enough, don't worry about it. We've got a great download with top tips for you, some learning opportunities afterwards for you and your team, because I know you're going to want to send this to them. And of course, it's being recorded, and we'll send that out as well. So we'll get started in about 1.5 minutes. I think it's important that during this time, as a common panelist, this is like the awkward point, right? Meredith, you're like, do I work in the background? Do I sit here and smile? What am I? Like, what are we supposed to do during this? So I think we should ask campfire questions. A campfire question is, right, you pick a topic and everybody answers. Completely off topic. Favorite breakfast cereal?
Oh, I hate breakfast.
Oh, nailed it. First time out. So 0. You would rather have nothing than any breakfast cereal.
Right.
I love breakfast, but I don't like cereal.
But you don't like cereal. Horrible question choice. Alyssa, save me.
Okay, I like Quaker oatmeal squares. They're so good.
That sounds very sensible.
Girl.
That's a CFO's breakfast.
Very practical.
Right? When I interview sales leaders, it's like, straight up Captain Crunch, Cocoa Puffs, that sort of thing. All right, how about beverage of choice? Let's
wine.
go to Alyssa first this time. Wine, Kevin, you say you are in the wine drinking room, aren't you?
Correct.
I think vodka soda.
Vodka soda. Alyssa.
I do love wine, but I would never give up Phil's coffee for wine. I would take Phil's coffee day and night for wine. Yeah, could not live without.
I don't know Phil's coffee.
Okay, well, if you come to the Bay, I will treat you.
That's it. You've tried them all, and Phil wins.
I have it. Yep.
Really? How about you, Meredith? Favorite coffee?
I don't even drink coffee. It's with that breakfast thing.
Right? None of it.
None of it.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd rather have dinner for breakfast, and a lot of people have breakfast for dinner, so that doesn't really even make sense.
I'd rather have more dinner than dessert.
Yeah,
so
true.
skip the desserts, and like if I could have an extra bread with butter or mashed potatoes or something.
Exactly.
What about you, Kevin?
My favorite coffee?
Yeah. You have a favorite?
I drink these. It's called San Francisco Bay Fog Chaser.
Okay, well,
I think we may have some head-to-head here.
I cheat though. I use the Keurig. It's the best Keurig pod that I've found.
And Meredith, you're East Coast, so does that make you a Dunkin's fan? Around you?
Dunkin' Donuts.
Everybody on the East Coast loves Dunkin' coffee.
They do. They
right?
do. They go get
Starbucks.
The things of Dunkin' Donuts coffee in the containers, and I don't know.
No,
Never had it.
Not going to work for you. I love it. That's great. If you're just joining us, we're talking really important things with top CFOs: breakfasts of choice, coffees of choice, adult beverages of choice. And we're just giving time for all of you guys to join us. So let's get started. Welcome. My name is Lauren Bailey. I'm the president and founder of Factor 8 and Girls Club. And it is my pleasure to bring you today's webinar, one where I know I'm going to learn more than any other webinar I've done before. I'm joined by 3 amazing CFOs who will introduce themselves in a moment, but let's introduce the topic first. For the last 6 months, it's been a whole different selling situation than any of us have been in before. And recent research that we read from our pals at Chorus have told us that CFOs are getting involved in buying decisions almost 100% more than they were in the past. And of course, it makes sense, right? Budgets are tight. Well, these CFOs are going to tell us how they're getting involved, why they're getting involved, and what we can do as sellers, as sales leaders to help get our deals through. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a peek behind the curtain. Get your pens and pencils ready. It's gonna be tip heavy. It's gonna be awesome. Yes, we're recording it because I can't write fast enough to get all the good stuff out of it. There's also a download that Amy's gonna put into chat ASAP so that you can get some great, wow, look at that, boom, there she goes. Or that you can get some top tips in the download. And then we are doing a rep training boot camp at the end of this to help your reps with some of these skills if you found this valuable. Let's start with introductions. Alyssa, you're top on my Brady Bunch, right? When I've got everybody in a side panel this time. So Alyssa, will you start, please?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks, Lauren, for having me. I'm really excited to participate. My name is Alyssa Filter. I am the CFO at Clary. Clary is an AI-based revenue operations platform. It provides real-time insights into every deal, predictive pipeline analytics, and continuously rolled up forecasts. So hopefully we have some Clary users in the audience today. So I've been in finance and accounting for about 15 years. My background is primarily in enterprise software, but spent quite some time in consulting, working across many different industries as well, primarily with high growth venture-backed startups. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. It's gonna be great. Meredith, you're next.
Thanks, Lauren. Thank you again for having me. I'm really excited to be joining the panel. I am CFO for S&ME. We're an engineering firm, mostly up and down the East Coast. We do all kinds of engineering, civil engineering, geotechnical engineering. We're in several different industries, healthcare, technology, energy. So we have a broad diversity of services, and we're about 45 years old. So it's a longstanding business. It's transitioned through many different presidents, and I was brought in from the outside. So I've been with the company about a year and a half, and we're excited. We're doing a lot of change management and a lot of bringing the company into the more efficient and more technologically advanced. So I'm excited about that. My previous experience have been in finance about 20 years. About 12 of that has been in a CFO role. I've been CFO for 2 other companies, one in life sciences. I was CFO for a global clinical research organization. And then prior to that, I was CFO for a construction company. So a broad array of industries, but what ties all these together is the project accounting experience. So I found that that's kind of my niche, and it's really exciting to work on projects, long-term projects, and clients. So thank you for having me.
Oh, 100%. I love the diversity in the backgrounds that are coming here, right? We've got software, we've got lots of different industries, and I love the fact that you mentioned you guys are innovating right now, because I know that is going to really color your answers throughout today. Kevin, bring us home, my friend.
Thanks, Lauren. And yeah, same sentiment as Alyssa and Meredith. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here. So I'm Kevin Kremke. I'm the CFO of Jump Crew. Jump Crew is a Nashville-based tech startup that uses our technology to help B2B customers through the whole kind of sales lifecycle, from build awareness to lead generation to closing deals. We've grown to over 300 employees in the last 4 years. Notable clients include Twitter, Distillery, and a very large Chinese e-commerce company that shall not be named. I've been at Jump Crew for just over a year now. I've been in finance really for over 25 years. Most recently, I came from, this is my first kind of tech startup role. I come from the large public company world, predominantly the energy sector. So most recently, I was CFO of a Fortune 500 energy company here in Nashville, where I held the dubious honor of being CFO of no less than 3 publicly traded companies at one time. So definitely enjoying the startup life, much different than the world I came from. Live just outside of Nashville with my wife and our 2 crazy little boys, aged 5 and 7.
Oh, we all have that about that age. That's cool. we were just talking about the joys of homeschooling and COVID and everything that comes with that, and where we have to be in our offices for backgrounds and all kinds of crazy things. I'm a huge fan of the folks at Jump Crew and what you guys are doing there, and I'm thrilled that you have joined us. Thank you very, very much. Cool. All right. So if you're just joining us, we've got a fabulous esteemed panel who's going to take us through what we need to be doing better and differently as sellers. So here's what we're going to do on the agenda. We've done our introductions and situations. Folks, I'm going to dig in. I've been in sales for 20 years and I'm horrible in finance. So I'm going to ask the questions, hopefully, that you want to know as well. And if not, I hope you'll put your questions in Q&A, and we'll have time for that at the end. We're going to get some dedicated advice from these esteemed and diverse panelists, and we're going to end with your questions. So I'm going to quit sharing right now so we can see everybody's faces, large and proud, and start with the first question. Are the statistics true? Are you getting more involved in decisions today? Why or why not? Alyssa, I've got you up first again for this one.
All right. So the answer is absolutely 100% yes. I'm getting much more involved in purchasing decisions than I ever was before. So shortly after we went into shelter in place as a company and in personal life, we really rethought our budget for the year and how the company may or may not be impacted by the changes in the macro environment. And so at least for a period of time, we put a full freeze on spend. And so really at that point, everything was a budget exception. And so we said what you thought your budget was before is no longer, and in which case everything required an escalation and to go through a budget exception process. And so that meant, yes, I was involved much more heavily than I was ever before in those purchasing decisions.
Alyssa, are you guys still in that mode of exception, or have you come back and said, okay, here are the budgets and what I don't have to touch?
We have released the freeze or come out of budget lockup. And so the budget has definitely changed from where we were at the beginning of the fiscal year, but we have re-released updated budgets. But I would say we're still operating such that I'm pretty heavily involved in purchasing decisions, much like earlier when budgets were still frozen. So I wouldn't say, despite the teams now having more idea of their budgets and having more of a budget to work with, I'm still participating in those decisions more so than I was pre-COVID.
Your calendar hasn't released yet, let's be clear. You're still crazy busy. Mary, what's going on in your company? Are you more involved?
I would say no. I would say we are pretty structured and have a budget and a planning session, a pretty detailed planning session at the beginning of the year. And through all the companies that I've worked for, we've had a very stringent buying process for all large major purchases. And the industry that I'm in now, a lot of our purchases are major equipment, major vehicles, things like that. So we, like Alyssa's company, did put a spending freeze at the beginning of the pandemic, and we kind of said, no additional purchases. We deferred a lot of, drill rig purchases. We were up for some new purchases of those instead of repairing those. But since then, we kind of been weighing the opportunity cost as things for our business have picked back up. They had a slight little, over 50% of our business is field-based, so we were still able to work through the shutdown. So that benefited us from one standpoint, but also utilized more of our resources at a continued pace. And we've had to make some of those exceptions. So we've had to look at those purchases that we deferred a little bit more closely and say, our opportunity cost, and we can't use a drill rig in Louisiana that's up north, and that's costing us business. So we've had to make some of those exceptions and move forward, even though there's still a lot of uncertainty with what's going to happen next year. How we're going to replace our backlog and fill our pipeline and things like that. Right. So I would say that my interaction has still been the same, but I've had to be a little flex a little bit more, I guess, so to speak. Not hold that hard line. We got to, hear more of the screams and the cries in the gray area versus the black and white numbers.
Right, and what should still get through. So I like that. Right. So you had a solid plan. There was a pause. Right. And now you're having to look long term. We'll dig into that in a little bit about what gets through and what doesn't. Kevin, how about your situation? What's happened in the last 6 months?
A lot. So as a tech startup, we're capital constrained. We don't have unlimited access to new capital. We've done a couple rounds of equity raise, but we kind of drew a line in the sand and said, no more outside dollars. This is what we have to work with. And we're also facing a very uncertain future here. And as a startup, I rewind a year ago, and purchasing was very decentralized. We kind of let business unit managers make decisions on what vendor spend they could do, what purchases. And as a result, we had a lot of redundancy. We had I would say just very inefficient purchasing process. So COVID sort of accelerated getting some discipline in the organization, and now we have a centralized procurement process, and I sign off on literally every penny that leaves the system. And so we've cleaned up a lot of the vendor spend, eliminated some redundancies, and not really put hard fast rules in place on what kind of ROI we need for spend, but just a lot more rigor and discipline.
And you're looking at every single deal that's going through. Yeah. So you're heavily involved still.
Yeah.
And now to where we are now, right? We're 6+ months later. Spending up, spending down, or is spending starting to level out? Kevin, why don't you tell us first? Keep talking.
It's up in some areas and down in some areas. So we were heavy WeWork users, but we were on month to month in San Diego, Denver, Cincinnati, and New York. So we said no more WeWork. So everybody is going to be working from home. It doesn't make sense for us to spend X dollars every month for a vacant office, and it's working. I mean, the work from home is actually working. So that's an example of where spending is down dramatically. But we also realized that while we're a tech company, our real asset is our people, and we're essentially a people as a service company.
Right.
And so we're investing in our people, in training and development, leadership training. So that's an area where spending is up significantly for us.
Well, that's exciting and smart, right? That's the smart area where spending's up. Meredith, let's go to you next. Spending up or down, or is it like Kevin and it depends on where?
I think it depends on where. I think there are certain strategic initiatives right now that we've prioritized. And so to that point, we deferred payments throughout the last 6 months to make sure that we were in a good place where we feel comfortable with where we are. We're fortunate we're not highly leveraged. And we have a little capacity, and we're projecting to end the year in a pretty good cash position. So, we're always looking at growth opportunities, whether they be expanding organically or through acquisition. So we're really trying to take on some initiatives that will make us more nimble and help us grow in the future and or near future, hopefully, and continue to prosper. So we're looking at those things. In other areas, while this does sound not as employee friendly, it's really, we've been looking harder at healthcare costs, and I have to give a little bit of color to that. Typically,
So
in the last 8 years, we hadn't made any significant changes to reducing benefits or increasing costs for our employees.
Yeah.
So this year, we've taken a much stronger look at what we can do to save money in those areas and expand offerings that, bringing our offerings up to date with things more in line with other companies, such as having a high deductible health plan and an HSA, which this company has never had, but other companies adopted that. I mean, I've been working at other companies 10 years ago where they've taken that strategy. So we're looking harder at things that we probably should have done several years ago, and that's kind of the mantra for this firm is there's a lot of missed opportunities that we can take advantage of that I think that's going to help us move forward.
I really appreciate your transparency on that. And what's great, sellers, as you're listening to this, realize, right, if I'm selling to Meredith's company, I need to make sure that I'm tying into innovation. We're talking about innovation and how important that is in the near and long term. If I'm selling to Kevin's company, I need to be tying into the employee base. I need to be tying into developing the people, right? See how different that would be in both those sales. What would it be in yours, Alyssa? Talk to me about spending there at Clary.
Yeah, spending at Clary, similar to the other two folks, has been up in areas, down in others. So I think the obvious places where spend is down is in travel, in-person conferences and events on the marketing side, and then anything related to the office. So whether that's meals or maintenance or those sorts of things. And so those are the areas where spend is down. Now, I specifically mentioned the marketing side. So while there's been a lack of in-person events, field events, we have ramped up digital marketing and other ways of building pipe. And so that's why I say spend is up in some areas, down in others, because we've had to innovate on how to pursue a pipeline.
Neat.
And so I think we've been talking a lot about where the right areas of investment are, in absence of some of these typical pipe gen activities that we've done that we should invest in instead. So that's one area. And then similar to Meredith, we've also been thinking about what areas should we invest in now for the longer term. And so I think we're going to get into specific what has gotten you over the line later. So
well, let's kick that off. I'm going to pop you that question right now.
Okay.
What's getting through?
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Give me some specific examples. Talk to me about categories of spend where it's working and they're getting through, and others that it's a hard stop.
Yep. So I mentioned the marketing example, but one other big example on the build for scale and build for longer term is we really invested in a data warehouse and BI. So that was not an area that we had invested heavily in previously, but we recognized that in order to scale the company over the long term, that's an area that was going to be really critical to us.
Okay, so I'm going to pause for one question because I don't understand any of that.
Okay.
And I'm going to speak for the other sellers on the phone who aren't in those industries, right? Like what I'm hearing is COVID was a great chance for leaders to come together and look at the company from a different lens, from a more strategic lens, and from a cautious lens, right? And it doesn't always mean stop all spending and restrict. It means let's be smart about the next few years. Get it? Had those same meetings myself. Why for you was data warehousing and BI something that came through?
Yeah, I think as a company, we use our own platform for data-driven decision making, but that's really specific to revenue operations.
Right.
And what we determined was how beneficial that was to one particular part of the organization, and we needed to expand that out to the rest of the company. And so it was really around, we were a high growth startup. We were able to not always rely on data-driven decision making because we had the growth to support our initiatives. We were able to raise capital at the right periods of time. But in order to make it to the next stage of the race, if you will, it was really important that we built the infrastructure in order to have very strong data-driven decision making and understand how all of the different aspects of the company were interrelated and how what's happening in one department may impact what's happening in another. And we didn't have a way really to visualize that and aggregate all of that data. And so we invested
in this huge time of making the big decisions, you were craving the data.
That's right.
We're craving the data on the other departments outside of revenue, and that helped push you into that. Interesting.
Yep, absolutely.
Give me an example of one or two things that absolutely aren't getting through.
Oh, I feel like I can hear my team sighing in the background. I mean, I would say most software tooling, unless they're replacing something else. So I would say we are a very typical technology company where we're investing in other technologies all over the place to the point where we have an out of control tech stack at times. And so this was a great opportunity to draw a line in the sand and say, absolutely no more SaaS tools. And if you desperately want something new, I think it was either Kevin or Meredith said, like, unless somebody's coming and crying at me, that's the approach I took as well. If somebody's coming and crying at me, I'll listen. But the response was often, what are you going to take away then? What are you going to replace it with? If it's that critical to you, we have tool bloat in areas. What will you have to get rid of in order to fund this project?
I like that. Interesting. Oh, thank you for being really specific. Meredith, let me come to you. Give me an example of what's getting through for you and why, and one or two things that just aren't.
Well, I think what's getting through is a lot of different, from Alyssa, a lot of software that will help us be more efficient, whether being, maybe reducing headcount, making the process more efficient. We have a lot of manual processes where we're still printing documents and typing those documents into something else. And so we need that software automation. And also, one of the things that I mentioned earlier, our field staff, they were able to continue to work during the beginning of the pandemic, but our administrative staff really wasn't. We were so tied to paper. And so we've been really taking the leaps and bounds, all together to try to automate everything, all of our paper processes. And centralized functions, such as centralized accounting functions that weren't typically centralized at this business, such as accounts receivable and accounts payable and cash collections.
A really good time of efficiency. So automation, efficiencies, innovation, and of course, if it ties to enabling work from home, that's going to get through, right? Yeah.
Right. Because, we've got to be thinking, we don't really know what's about to come about us all this fall. You hear a lot of talk and speak about, flu and additional COVID outbreaks. And, we want to learn from our mistakes, not, keep our head in the sand and not be prepared again. Also another, added thing is our employees want the flexibility. We have a lot of younger employees that are starting with the company. Even though this is a more conservative industry, we still have those needs here, and we need to be reactive and adapting to those so that we can continue to hire and recruit people from all these tech companies that are joining this call today.
All those cool tech companies. I hear that from a lot of people, that there's a percentage of the workforce that misses being in the office, and there's a huge percent that doesn't. So I don't know that it ever is going to be that back. Kevin, let's get specific now for these sellers about what convinces you to say yes to a deal. We've talked about the types of spending you're approving and not approving, but when somebody's coming in with a plan and they want your stamp of approval, what are you asking them for? What do you need to see?
I think the big things are similar to what Alyssa was saying. We have a lot of sort of data integrity issues that don't allow us to scale the business. So that's one area that we are explicitly spending in. So kind of data cleanup, data warehousing, data visualization, because we also are a very data-driven, KPI-driven organization. But if you're making decisions on bad data, you're by default making bad decisions potentially. Mm-hmm. So things that help us scale the business are getting pushed through. I mean, that's absolutely things that are getting pushed through. We invested a lot in our CRM, but we have kind of on the periphery of our CRM systems that don't necessarily talk to it. So things that are getting through are replacement systems that talk to our CRM. So the tech stack becomes more integrated, and you create a lot more efficiency, and you remove a lot of the data issues.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of trends of this was a great time to realize we need better data for decisions and to do some internal housekeeping. We're not all reacting to the crazy amount of maybe necessarily business that's coming through our own company. So it's time to clean house and to create better efficiencies and processes internally. So when somebody's come to you, crying or not crying, Alyssa, right? Whether they've been in tears or not, talk to us about what you're specifically asking them for. What's convinced you to approve or to unstick a deal in the last few months?
Yeah. So one thing we did as an executive staff very shortly after the beginning of the pandemic and all going to shelter in place was we revisited our company strategy. So we have every year we revisit our mission, our vision, and our strategy for the year. So we went back and we said, how has our strategy for the year changed given this new environment? And then we put together basically 4 pillars or focus areas that were the most important things to us as an executive team for the rest of the year, given the new environment. And so when someone was coming and asking for spend, it had to directly relate and correlate to those 4 key pillars and really tie back to company strategy, because that said to me, that's what the executive team is all aligned on. This is what we agreed are the most critical things to move the business forward. And so if it didn't directly align to one of those 4 key strategy areas for the company, it was kind of dead in the water. So that was the first piece.
And do you communicate that to all your employees?
Oh yeah.
Right. Absolutely. This is it. These are the 4 areas. So the smart ones come in already tied to one of those areas, right? That's sort of step 1.
Yep.
You can get that done, Grab. And as an external vendor, how would they know to come in and tie to a 4 key pillar area? Hopefully they're internal champion.
Yeah. Well, I think you just have to ask the question. As a seller, be smart enough to ask your economic buyer the question and say, have your key company strategies changed given the current environment? And does this initiative map to one of those key pillars? And so whether it's, go ahead.
No, I just want to, I need to underline that. Sorry for the interruption, right? But have your key company strategies changed in light of the current situation? Sellers, my friends, you may have asked that to the person who wants your user buyer, to your influencer. But one of the themes that I've heard from all of these panelists behind the scenes is you got to start over with me. You've got to ask me those questions too. Don't assume you know. So thank you for phrasing it in a perfect question. Seriously, you don't have a sales background at all? That was well done.
Work with a lot of sellers.
Well done. All right, keep going. So it's got a title of 4 pillars, but then what else? They come in and say, all right, please, please, please. Here's a tip. Yeah. What else?
Yep. And then a couple other criteria that I personally look for is, number one, has my internal champion done the hard work of investigating alternatives? And I want to know, what is another way to solve this problem? Is it something manual that we're doing currently? Like Meredith said, that's headcount related. So we talked about that efficiency and trade-off between technology and headcount. I think that's something that most CFOs are looking at, is what's that? That's part of building the ROI justification. And so I think I want to know, what are the alternatives, both whether one of those options is doing this manually, and what are the other technologies that you evaluated, and what are the price points on there, to ensure that we've done our homework on what's best in class and whether the price point is right given competitors in the space. But I want that from my champion, my internal champion. And so I think advice to sellers would be, make sure that you're arming your economic buyer, your internal champion, with the competitive landscape and what the capabilities are across your competitors as well, and what differentiates you, so that they can come present to an executive in a really concise way what the value proposition is, in particular against competitors.
Yeah, I love it. There's a lot of nuggets in there, right? There's 3 big ones. Ask me the question about my core strategies. The second one is, sellers, you don't have to do this blind, right? You don't have to hope that they're finding competitors. What a wonderful opportunity to provide some competitors. Aren't there some that you typically beat? I know there's a few in my space I love to go up against. And when somebody comes just to me, I make sure that they're checking out my competition as well. But of course, I love feeding them the ones that I always beat, right? So be ready for that, and make sure that your internal champion's ready for that. You may not have had to do these steps in the past, but guess what? Here are 3 CFOs telling you it's true. They're getting ready. They have to rubber stamp every deal, and that's what they want. The third thing I love that you were talking about there is compare the cost to the alternative. Sometimes the alternative is a different software. Sometimes it's a manual workaround. Sometimes it's probably the cost of doing nothing, right? And so we have to look at both of those. Really, really good insight. Meredith, you look ready.
I was just saying, the only other thing I would add to all 3 of those things, I absolutely think that those are 3 core fundamentals, but also, exemplifying ways that this product or service or solution can grow with the company. I think that's really critical in hearing about what can you do now, but what can you do later, and really understanding for the seller to understand, how am I going to grow? Am I going to grow by acquisition or organically? How fast am I going to grow? And how is this tool, product, whatever, going to allow me to do that faster or grow with me? Or is it a longer term solution, or is it really a short term solution? So
yeah, I like that insight. And that's something that I've learned that surprised me so far today, is that even in all of the belt tightening and uncertain times, right? 3 CFOs from widely different industries and backgrounds and experiences are all looking at growth and scale right now. So tying to that is a really, really cool tip. Kevin, what else can you add to this?
Yeah, I think Jump Crew's approach is a little less strategic. So I do always ask the question, what are the alternatives? Is this something we can do ourselves? Is it better to insource this versus outsource this? But then when it becomes just kind of the tactical aspect of it, if somebody is coming to me asking for dollars, that we have a finite bucket of dollars per business unit, and we track it every single day, update our cash forecast model every single day. It kind of comes down to trade-offs. Like, okay, you have X amount of dollars over the next 12 months. Here's what you're spending. You don't have a penny more to spend. What can you eliminate?
And it makes sense.
If
And
you're telling me you need this, then you have to find something you need less.
you need to unneed something else.
Exactly.
Interesting. So what that tells me from the seller's point of view, first off, is that you're not just competing against your typical competitors, right? If you're selling training, your competition isn't the other training vendors. It's everybody else in the company who wants to spend money, right? And then from there, we have to arm our champions internally with, how are you going to justify this budget? And sometimes that means, what do you need this more than? So that's a lot more heavy lifting for us sellers up front, which makes a lot of sense. Now, we've referred to ROI, but we haven't dug into it yet, right? ROI, of course, return on investment. I'd love to hear from each of you. How do you measure it, and what's good ROI to you, right? When somebody comes internally and says, hey, we're going to get 2x ROI by the end of next year. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that laughable? What do you need? Alyssa, you're already laughing. So let's start with you. What's the benchmark?
Yeah, I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I've tried to help my internal team and my sellers say, like, here's what a strong ROI recommendation would be to go share with a prospect. And the truth is, it's just so different for every company and every line item. I would measure ROI differently for something that my G&A team wanted to buy than something that my sales or marketing team would want to buy, because I think some teams, it's much more quantifiable than other teams. And so it's very hard to give. I know I'm like kind of skirting the question here, but it's really
I'm going to nail you down to it. You can dance all you want, but you're giving me a number.
Yeah. One thing I will say though is I still don't have a number, but one thing I will say, I don't like when I get ROI documents from sellers that give me like astronomical ROI numbers. That I don't want such a wacky, like ridiculous, you're going to save me $10 million on something that costs me $10,000, because then it kind of invalidates, or it kind of,
You don't buy it.
too much scrutiny on that ROI calculation. And so I think if you're helping your internal champion build a case around ROI, make it reasonable and digestible, and don't focus so much on trying to show like multiple, or exponential return on investment. Because what you don't want to do, at least from my point of view, I don't think you want the CFO scrutinizing your ROI and then spending time picking holes into why it's not right. I think you want it to be directional. You want to show areas that you're going to save time, save efficiency, but I also don't want to see something that immediately I can discredit and not believe in, because then it slows down the whole process if I have to get into the nitty gritty of why you're telling me something's going to be exponentially more than I believe it could be.
So if the CFO has to enable editing on your spreadsheet, it's all downhill from there.
That's
Keep it
right.
simple. Okay.
I wouldn't give them the spreadsheet.
Don't give them the spreadsheet. It's you couldn't
Give them a chart or a graph or something pretty. Don't
keep it in a picture. Don't give the CFO a spreadsheet. Kevin, do you agree?
Absolutely. do not do that for sure. Yeah, we don't necessarily look at ROI that much. So much of our spend is more qualitative and solves a business issue that's really difficult to model ROI around. So I focus really more on what business issue are you solving, and does it allow us to further scale?
Okay, interesting. What else should come into the mix, right? You look for a return on investment, you look for other ways. Does it help us with scale? What other questions are you asking people when they're trying to justify their spend? Meredith, I'm going to go to you first.
Well, I think it's a lot of what Alyssa already said. It's about what other workarounds do we have to do to get this done? Are we already getting it done, or is it something new that we're trying to take on? So is it a problem, or is it a want? Do we really have to address this now? So, I mean, I think it just varies from what it is. And I will say, absolutely, again, agreeing with Alyssa, if it's earning us money, if it's for a project, if it's to help us win business, it's a much easier sell than, we need a new printer for the accounts payable staff, or they want a new monitor for their home. There's different sides of the business, and we address those decisions differently. So I think it really, really just depends.
And how about you? Do you have an ROI number or a percent that you use as a benchmark?
I don't, and I think it's really, again, gut. It's about the whole sales process. It's about the internal need and how they can sell me on it. Is it really, again, is it an opportunity cost? Are we losing business if we don't do something? And on top of, are we losing business, are we also costing ourselves more money? Or sometimes, again, does it align with our culture? We have a very strong safety culture here. So, we've seen some rise in our auto insurance premiums. And while we don't have any cold, hard numbers, we haven't invested in a telematics system or a GPS system for our 700 vehicles. We're going to go ahead and spend that money, even though it's very expensive, because we really, we'll get a lot of data from that. We've, seen it work. I've seen it work in other companies. And we're just going to, take that leap of faith that it's going to help us be safer as a company. It's going to help us reinforce our practices and our culture and be able to hold people accountable versus not knowing what they're doing wherever. And ultimately, I hope that it will help us save us money on our auto insurance premiums and on vehicle maintenance and things like that. So,
and gas and all kinds of things.
Yeah,
I've got a lot.
I think it's a trifold thing.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So I like this. So again, here's this theme I'm hearing. It's got to align with one of our pillars, right? And for you, it wasn't, the new pillar this year of the mission. It was a core value, which makes sense, right? So somebody had just asked our question. What was that great sales question Alyssa told us earlier? And Alyssa, do you remember what it was verbatim? I know it's tough, right? I'm going to give you a shot before I try.
Yeah, just really around, how has your company's strategy changed or not changed in light of the current environment? But you could ask the question differently. Your core values. What's core to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that question is good in any given time or any year. Tell me about your business. What are your challenges? What's your strategy? Like, it doesn't matter if it's a pandemic or if it's not a pandemic. It's taking that extra time for the seller to learn about the business, because they're all different and they're all dealing with different things at different times.
Yes.
I might be interested in something now or not interested in something now, but
and that's
6 months from now, I might be looking for that person.
And so it's always worth an update. I love how you tied us into that again, but you also talked about tying in a spend to saving money, opportunity cost of not losing money, or to revenue generation. So all three of those make sense. And of course, right, 3 different ways to tie into the dollars. So we've talked about growth and scaling, core initiatives, and saving money, making more money, right? Or helping us grow and scale as being our top themes so far. Love that. Really good. Any other core initiatives where you tend to say yes versus no than what we've covered so far? Anybody on the panel? Like, oh yeah, it's about saving money, but it's also about blank.
The only thing I can think of, sorry, Alyssa, is, you don't want to be the last one in your industry to do something. So if everyone else has taken on this initiative or bought this product, bought this service, whatever, that might be the swaying factor. So I think it's understanding the industry that you're trying to sell to, who the big players are in that industry, what they're utilizing that service, product, or software for, and using that as a leverage tool to make your sales pitch.
That's beautifully transparent, Meredith, and it's something that all sellers should understand and use, right? Because that's a true pressure. CFOs are not just looking at the bottom line, or as we learned also, right, the contribution to the top line, but being the last in your industry to get somewhere, keeping up and making sure that you're current, it is still top of mind. Alyssa, what were you going to add to that?
Nothing else. I'm good. Thank you.
That was it. Kevin, give us a nugget we haven't thought of before of how you're making these decisions.
So I'll start with kind of how we relate to our customers. So we lean on our more well-capitalized customers for kind of better payment options. Like I mentioned, Twitter actually prepays us twice a year. I mean, it's a massive working capital benefit for us.
No kidding.
So to the extent that your company is well capitalized and cash flowing, then approach the target with payment terms that could kind of ease the buying decision better.
100%. And we're going to talk about a couple of those next. We're going to go round robin on this. Thank you for starting it, Kevin. It's one of the tips we've heard of, and something we tried at Factor 8 too. We chose a couple key companies and said, hey, we're going to offer special pilot pricing, deferred payments, or payment terms, right? Pick what works best for you, because we still want to work with you, but we know cash is king right now. And we're going to prove our value, or we're going to start the work and have payment afterwards versus upfront. And that's working at Jump Crew. Clary, what's going on? Alyssa, what's working there? What kinds of special offers have you seen come through that have caught your attention?
Yeah, I want long-term savings. So that's where I'm specifically focused. So as the company scales, as I add more licenses or more volume or whatever metric the cost is based on, I want that to decrease over time as the company scales. So I mentioned we're in a really good spot. We fundraised last fall, so we're in a very fortunate position there. And so the difference between 30 and 60 days or even quarterly versus annual payments makes no difference to me. What I care about is that the cost scales efficiently as the company grows. So that's where I'm paying the most attention in agreements is, do we get that scalability from a cost perspective over the longer term?
So right now, if somebody's coming with a 1-year deal, you'd frankly be happier to look at, give me some cost savings over a 3-year deal, provided I know that this is what's going to help me get there.
Absolutely.
Good. That's really fascinating perspective. Not the case for everybody. So what an important thing to understand is, right, well, what's cash flow look like in this target company? Meredith, a different perspective. What has caught your attention and been helpful for you to say yes?
Well, I think it depends, and it definitely depends on cash flow. And so, to speak directly to Alyssa's point, looking for long-term savings, sometimes I'm not as apt to do that right now because I don't want to be locked into something, because I know that we're changing constantly, and or we want to be changing constantly. So we might be taking on a solution for a shorter period of time. So, I might be looking at deciding if this works. So a year structure and a higher savings in the year structure might be more beneficial to me. Then I see if this is really something that we want to pursue long-term, or maybe we're going to go a different direction. Also think, right now we're not in a highly leveraged situation, but have worked for companies that are highly leveraged, and those debt payments every quarter, every month are pretty strong. And so having something that defers payments, an opportunity to defer payments, or quarterly payments would be something. So I think it's really understanding your client. It's probably not going to get that much detail from them, but you can ask some key questions and get a feel for their sentiment. Just, kind of straight out asking them are these things important to you? Is this going to make a difference in the sale?
Would your champions internally know that? So here's what I'm getting at, right? These are all really important things that we've got to add to as sellers to our tool belt, these kinds of questions, right? Ultimately, this is what's going to work when they get to your level. How many of you are actually taking the meetings with the seller? Or does the seller have to get all of this from the internal champion and you meet just internally? So Kevin, let me go to you first. Are you meeting with the seller, or are you getting all your information internally?
I'd say it's probably 75-25, getting all the information internally versus meeting with the seller. I mean, I do get involved at the seller level occasionally, but typically it's just the internal champion.
Got it. Interesting. All right, so I'm going to come back to that. Let's get everybody's here. Meredith, I see you're off mute. Are you meeting with the seller? Are you meeting with the internal folks only?
Mostly meeting with the internal folks. And, often what I see is we'll have a meeting about whatever it is, and I'll ask questions, and they'll go back, and then they get me those answers, and then we'll do another exchange. And then they're like, oh, by the way, there's these pricing terms, and we didn't really understand what those were, but here's this email. And so that information would have been great to have up front,
Earlier.
because then it would have saved us a step, because then I have to say, well, here are my other questions about these pricing terms. What exactly, does this mean? And always the internal person is like, I don't know, I need to go find out, which is not their fault at all. But, I think it's maybe impressing upon the internal person, convey this information up front as part of the whole package, so that we can go ahead and get all those questions answered or understand what flexibility will work best for your company.
From the beginning, prepare to sell the CFO as your final step is definitely what I'm hearing. Alyssa, what's your percentage? Are you meeting with sellers or internal?
I'm probably 5% meeting with sellers, maybe 10. I do not want to meet with sellers. I want to stay in the background as much as possible and be the final backstop. And so, not very frequent.
But let me ask you the tough question. One of the really important things you all told me in preparation for this was, don't assume you know my business, right? You've got to ask these questions. But if you're not meeting with the seller, how do they get these answers, right? How are they going to know what's really critical to you as the chief financial officer? Because let's be honest, they're going to get different answers from your VP of sales, who they're selling to, or their VP of marketing, who they're selling to. Alyssa, I'm coming to you first.
That's a really hard one.
Right? I don't know the answer to this question. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
I don't think I have a silver bullet on that one. You would hope that across the company and the leadership team in particular, you would be aligned on what the most important things are to the company and the initiatives that are going to get through. But similar to Meredith describing the back and forth with a seller over terms, I think sometimes that happens over whether this aligns with company strategy or not as well. Because even if the internal person knows everything about your company strategy, your key initiatives, and what's important, there's still going to be something that doesn't quite fit into those buckets that they still really want and are going to go through the cycle on. And so then it'll be how to creatively get a deal done. And so I wish I could give you the secret sauce here, but I don't have it. Hopefully Kevin Meredith do.
Yeah. How should sellers find out what's important to CFOs?
I think maybe just asking the internal seller, we hear what's important to you. Are there other things that you think might be important to your finance team, your leadership team, and gauging their response to see if they really know or if they need to follow up. So I think that would give them a little bit of inkling if that communication, that cascading of the messaging and the strategic planning and the culture is filtering through, or if they might need to do a little bit more digging.
Well done. Really well said. We've noticed that as well. Kevin, I got a follow-up question for you that's come in on our Q&A panel. I'm going to get you in just one second. But here's what we're teaching people right now at Factor 8 is you've got to partner with that person internally. And some of that is helping them along the way. So you're right. I think, Meredith, I'm with you, right? You're not going to just bust your way through to the CFO. And by the way, if you do, you've gone around the internal champion. Raise your hand if that would piss you off. Right? Kevin, you're okay with that? Somebody get you?
No, all right.
Yeah. Right? So you can't go around them. We have to work with them and helping them ask the right questions early in the process to get you those answers from the CFO is really the way to go. So you've got to prepare and get what the CFO's needs are through your internal champion, and then be ready to answer to provide that information. So it's almost step one, step two. And we're going to talk about that in that Factor 8 bootcamp. Follow-up question to you, Kevin, was that 25%, you're the easy mark on the panel. Everybody wants to know, how do I become part of the 25%? What makes you say yes?
The ones that I'm involved in, what really resonates with me are the ones that ask questions, like really try to understand the business, what problem we're trying to solve. When somebody walks in with the pitch, like, here's how great my company is, here's how great our product is, like, okay, but what does it do for me?
Right.
Start with just ask questions, understand the business, and really try to figure out what we're trying to solve for. And
I love that advice. That's what everybody's looking for. So when they when they want to get to you, when they have a chance to get to you, you're saying yes to the people who you know are going to be asking those questions, or who your internal champions already come to you with questions. And that's what turns you on to say yes instead of the pitchy guy.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes good sense. All right, folks, I'm going to pull our show back up and start taking some questions. Does everybody see our agenda again? Good. I've got my own technical difficulties happening here. I'm pulling up our question and answer panel. Let's get some of, I'm going to do one last lightning round of advice from my panel, and then this is your last chance to type in a question that we'll get to. Here we go. Lightning round. Top tips for sellers. Like, what's your pet peeve and what do you wish that all salespeople would stop doing now? Alyssa, you're off mute. You're first.
You mentioned it just a minute ago. Actually, my biggest pet peeve is when a seller goes around my internal champion and reaches out to me directly. I do not like that at all.
Don't do it. Love it. All right. How about you, Meredith?
Just sending me stuff randomly, like it could be junk, it could be a book, and I only read on the Kindle now. So it's just all kinds of stuff that I have to figure out what I'm going to do with it, because I feel bad throwing in the trash. It doesn't really make me inquire more about the company or anything like that, but I feel guilty because I've got this stuff.
Don't send me the tchotchkes.
Yeah.
See, this is so great because sales leaders and marketing, we love that crap. We just think it's fantastic. I go to a conference and it's like, I got Christmas presents for days for the kids. I don't have to buy anything in the airport gift shop. This is great. Kevin, pet peeve or advice?
That's mine exactly. I get things randomly mailed to me all the time. Like in 1 week, I had 2 people mail me my alma mater T-shirt. Like, I don't have a wardrobe problem. That doesn't solve a business issue. It's not really getting my attention. So stop.
Interesting. I love it. So ask better questions, stay aligned to the values and the challenges. Don't assume you know my business. Don't go around the internal champion, and be prepared with ROI models, pro formas, costs of doing nothing, but not ones that are so crazy lightning high that I want to enable editing on your Excel spreadsheet. Amazing tips. One or two
And
more.
I have one more.
Good.
Figure out how I can find you. A lot of times I've been looking for a salesperson in a certain area and I can't find that person. So be familiar with the people that you're selling to in that industry, the organizations, be available on LinkedIn and things like that. It's been interesting to see how when I am actually looking for someone, it's been challenging to find that person.
Oh, that is fascinating. Interesting. All right, I've got a great question here from Mick. What's the best way to open lines of communication and build a relationship from ground zero? So y'all get bombarded, you get sent crap, right? What does cut through the noise and catch your attention, if anything? Kevin, how about you on that one?
So I'm the worst one to ask this question because I don't respond to any cold emails, or I don't even pick up my phone if it's a number I don't know.
Wow. So if you're talking to a vendor, it's because somebody internally brought them to you.
Exactly.
Anybody have a different answer? Same. Meredith, anything work?
I think it's the same, unless it's something that a connection has brought to the table for me to talk to. Sometimes that will happen. But yeah.
You're looking for that referral. You're looking for that connection. I love it. That's fascinating. Really good. All right. I know a lot of people are hopping to their next meetings. We captured some of the very top tips from today and top tips from sales leaders in a webinar we did last week, who proposed all kinds of great things like financing options, etc. So great tips from leaders on both sides in our download. You can get that at factor8.com/CFO. If your sales teams need some help asking better questions, aligning, getting to the CFO and preparing for the CFO, we have a Factor 8 boot camp that is built to help them do that. So 60 learning modules, live sessions, this recording, the other recording, even a free manager license to help them get there. So you can find that at factor8.com/boot-camp. All of those links are in chat. Feel free to connect with me if you have follow-up questions that didn't get asked here That's my contact information. Jot it down. You can get me directly. It takes me days to answer email, but I promise that I will. And I want to end by saying thank you one more time for this incredible learning. Alyssa, Meredith, Kevin, you opened my eyes in a lot of places and gave some really solid advice. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Now, are any of you going to be kicked out for giving the dark side of sales all of these great tips? Is there a secret CFO association that you'll now be blackballed in for talking to us?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I promise not to send you any tchotchkes or crap, but you do have my sincere gratitude. And from the folks on the panel, I've loved seeing the comments coming in. Thank you ever so much, everybody. Happy selling. Good luck out there. We'll see you next time.
Thank you guys.
Bye.